All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Just to kick us off as we're going through what the agenda looks like today and just some initial intros, I would love to share a poll with you guys just to see who has run quarterly conversations before. Have you used 90? Did you run them outside of 90? Or have you not even started them yet? So I just went ahead and sent that around. We'd love for you guys to fill it out and we'll share the results before we dive into the meat of the content here. But just so you guys know, agenda for today, we'll do a quick intro with Jim and I. We'll talk about a little bit about what companies experience before and after they start doing one-on-ones in their company, what a good framework looks like, and then obviously how to implement them. So going into the software and talking through a lot of really what you should be doing within 90, how the information pulls together, and then we'll go through an IDS where, you guys will have questions throughout the webinar. Please post them in the chat and use that. And then Spencer or Stephen will pick those up and we'll talk about it. All right. By the end of this, we'll have great one-on-ones. So we'll send you access to resources.
Yeah, this is a super important topic, Christine, especially this time of year. People, quite often people have only annual reviews. Holy crap, folks! If you're in that camp, be prepared to be. Well, I'll be gentle about it, but you need to be doing it more often than that. And we'll tell you exactly why. But let's make sure you at least do a great annual review this year, so that so you have people that know where they're going, and you get to agreements rather than just assumptions.
Definitely. And so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Christine Watts, head of product and client success here at 90. So I'll be talking a lot about the software aspect. And as we dive into the features, showing you how to do some things. Then we also have Jim Haviland here, coach extraordinaire.
Thanks, Christine. And I'm actually showing you, I'm not actually, this is Laramie, Wyoming behind me, or just outside of it, where I recently had some client sessions. And I'm talking with all my clients over the last month or so about getting deeper into using a more structured approach to their quarterly conversations. That employee feedback feature, critically important to having a great culture. And Christine, you got put together some great stuff today for us to talk through.
Awesome. So before we dive in, I just want to go ahead and share these poll results so everybody can see it. We've got around 25% of people that have gone through and used 90 for quarterly conversations or annual reviews. Another 25% that have done them but haven't done it in the software yet. And then we've got 50% that have not run quarterlies yet. So this is a great opportunity for you guys to learn more about really why you should be starting that within your company.
A lot of benefit there, my friends. A lot to go get. So this will be fun for you.
Yes.
Or educational. Fun, maybe not, but it'll be fun.
Both.
Christine will make it fun.
All right. So at first, just want to kind of talk about maybe why your past one-on-ones haven't worked. So if there's no agenda, if there's no prep, if you're not diving into the real issues, like you're going to experience a lot of friction with it. And maybe you've tried and just not kept the process going moving forward because you don't have a lot of those consistency aspects set up. And that leaves a lot of times those relationships kind of in a weird place. There's not trust between managers and direct reports. You're leaving issues that are uncovered. You're going to end up with more turnover because you're not having the consistency with your people to like dive in one-on-one with each person.
Yeah, the one-on-one conversation, Christine, is just like we talk about with weekly meetings and quarterly meetings. You want to have a consistent approach so everyone knows what they're getting when they show up, right? You don't need to have this, well, I don't know what's going to happen at my quarterly conversation, so make it really consistent. Have a very consistent objective for why you're doing it and things you're going to review. And you want to make sure you ask all the right questions. I mean, that's so much of what we do with business operating systems is make sure we're reviewing the right things, the right cadence, and asking the right questions. So it gets incrementally better every time. And that means both having a better relationship with your employees, but also in having better and better conversations, getting better and better at kind of seeing things for what they really are. Because it's an important part of everyone's life to know that they're doing a great job at what they're doing, or they feel secure in what they're doing. If they don't feel secure, if they don't feel solid and confident, they're not getting your best out of them. You just never do. You need to be confident to be able to do your best work. And this is the primary reason to get to that. Secondary is this trust. We know, Christine, we talk about it so much. High trust organizations are the ones that are most effective. And getting to the place where you can say the things that need to be said, both directions, where everyone knows that they can say what they need to say without getting shut, closed out or shut down or ignored. Both directions. That's when you get to the place where we trust, and we trust each other to do the right thing. We trust each other to take accountability and actually go do it. And both directions, whether you're talking about the direct report or the manager, that has to be bi-directional. And this is a great, way of capturing that. And we talk about culture being captured in rituals, artifacts, and language. So we're going to give this a name. We're talking about one-on-ones today. That's a very specific thing. And the ritual of having this conversation, setting time aside to say, hey, Stephen, hey, Spencer, hey, Christine, I want to talk to you about how you're doing. This is what I'm seeing. Tell me what you're feeling. This is how I think I'm doing. You're going to tell me how I'm doing. That setting that time aside, because we all think it's important. We think it's important.
Yeah. Valuing that individual is so important. So I want to talk a little bit about building those high trust relationships and really like breaking it down into 3 key aspects. So one is just consistency. So like you said, if people don't know it's coming, you're going to leave them with uneasiness. You need to make sure it's every single quarter. If you're waiting an entire year to have a conversation with somebody, so much time has passed. You're not going to remember what happened in Q1 when you're all the way in Q4.
And they're going to leave. Christine,
yes.
we've already seen this. I mean, I'm old, so I'm used to having my boss say, suck it up, man. But that's not a great way to build trust, to build a really highly effective organization. You want to help people become fully realized. And so you need to have that conversation, a really deep conversation about whether you're working out in this role, whether this role is working out for you, and having that consistent cadence of doing it is, we say quarterly, but I know, Christine, you've talked about, when you're first starting out, it should be every month. Let's have this conversation every month. Just make sure we're catching that stuff early and that we both are staying on the same page, because gosh, man, we've seen it plenty, go 6 weeks in. Hey, no one really asked me about how I was feeling. I didn't really feel like I was connected with my boss. I mean, people have options right now, so don't leave them hanging out there. If there's someone you thought you've spent time on recruiting and you value them, give them that consistent conversation, because it's a place where they can go put those difficult conversations, a box they can put it in, they know they're going to have it. Just like we know with the weekly meeting, hey, do I have to call an ad hoc meeting for this or send out an angry email? No, there's a place for me to put that. I can feel confident that I can focus on my day because I know that I'm going to have this great conversation at this future place. And know that it's not too far away. And that's where you got to decide what too far away is, but consistency is what builds trust.
Yeah. And you already mentioned this earlier, but being open, a lot of times people think feedback or having a one-on-one is a manager telling their employee, telling their direct report, like, this is what I think about you. And it's so important to have that back and forth feedback. So you're not only telling somebody what you think, but you are open to receiving that feedback yourself.
I want everyone at home to try this on your own. Learn this phrase. Tell me about that. Tell me about that. Yet not like, well, what do you mean by that? That's just tell me about it. Create the opening for people to say what they need to say. So you'll see when we go into this, hey, here's some information that the system has captured about your performance and what you accomplished. Like, tell me about that. You'll tell me how you think you did. I'll tell you what I see. And maybe I'm missing stuff. I want you to tell me what I'm missing so I can get to understanding. And that's the point here, is to get to that connection, not to get to feedback, but to get into connection. It's one-on-one is, it's two ones together.
Yeah.
And we're trying to find that place where we're perfectly connected. That's like a very EOS-y concept of this idea that I'm not living on top of you telling what to do every day, and I'm also disconnected from you. I need to be perfectly connected. And every time we have a relationship, we want to make sure it's the right place. So, but openness, holy mackerel, Christine, I got to tell you, I mean, I'm sure we've all had these jobs where you just you never felt comfortable saying what needed to be said. And that just
Right. And
a giant weight. It's like walking around with a weight blanket on.
exactly. Yeah. If you don't, if the person that has something to say doesn't think, oh, I'm not going to be heard, nobody's going to care, they're not going to bring it up. And then you're just leaving all these uncovered issues just out there.
We teach often this notion of the tribal leadership and trying to get to the place where we're all in it together for each other, which is great, which is where we want to go. I mean, that's the most effective organizations live in that space. But so many people start with this. Either I know I'm great, but you suck, or everyone else sucks but me, or everyone else is great and I suck. I mean, like you got to get out of that, right? It's so easy to get sucked into that, and being open is the best way to say, this is what I value about you. This is what I'm not seeing. Tell me what I'm missing. And both directions.
And the final aspect is that inquisitive nature. So tell me about that. Don't just let them say, like if something comes up, dig into it and be that person where you're asking the right questions and asking, in depth, how you can help get them into a better place.
And Christy, I love this because it's so, what we're going to show you is a tool set for executing on a ritual. But the point, and we say this all the time when we're coaching, we're objective driven, not agenda driven. So there is an agenda, but the objective is to have clarity, is to have create that connection. So we both know how to take our expectations and turn them into agreements, and we both know how to help each other out, or we know that this isn't going to work out, right? That is an okay thing to say. It's okay to get to the point where, Joe was saying, watch your nonverbals. Absolutely, this is a deep conversation. This should be mentally prepared for this, and to get to that place where everyone's really open, be very clear on that, and to be inquisitive. Get to the place where you really know and appreciate where this person's coming from, because that's going to give you the best answer. Whether it's that they stay and you're just loving them, they stay and they need some support, or they need to go. Whatever the outcome's going to be.
Yeah. So these three things we think really brings a high trust relationship into every single department, because hopefully every single manager is running these quarterly conversations. And if you don't have consistency, you're driving people towards isolation. You're making them think they can't bring anything up until the end of the year, or they don't even know when.
Right.
You're at risk of turnover, obviously, for the consistency reasons, and for, just not being open and being willing to accept feedback. They're going to go somewhere where they can get it. And you're going to leave undiscovered issues if you're not trying to get to the root cause and ask those inquisitive or be inquisitive.
In the absence of information, we make assumptions, and assumptions are toxic. So, and especially when you're talking about people that are your direct reports, there's a reasonably good chance that not all as mature in their roles as maybe you are. So you've got to, as a manager, you've got to take the lead in helping them get to that place, but giving them a consistent place where they know we're going to talk about these things, where we're going to bring up things we don't talk about every day, and they get a chance to ask questions they've never been able to ask, is the only way to keep them from layering on all these burdens of assumptions they're making, are feeling slighted, are feeling like they're not heard. Every one of those things is putting on another weight belt, and eventually they're just going to say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to feel great about my job here, and they go. Or they become toxic, and you've turned a great employee into a horrible employee, and now they're a cancer. So don't be that boss. Be the boss that understands that, hey, the best way to get everyone really working effectively. By the way, Christine, all this works in your personal relationships too, but we're talking about business here. But having a great, effective relationships in the business, you got to go first, and you got to, and these basic guidelines will help you get to that high trust relationship that's effective.
It's really funny when you said, tell me about that. I was thinking, good advice for marriage and for work.
Everywhere you go, man, everywhere you go. Someone says something and you feel triggered. Spencer, that one's for you. Someone says, Spencer's so cool. He doesn't feel triggered ever. But
Never.
I know both Chris and I, my partner Chris and I, we both have taken that one on. It's like, when you feel like you're gonna come back with an emotional response, maybe start with, tell me about that, and give everyone a chance to really air out what they really meant, because the words matter.
Yeah. All right. So now I was going to go ahead and jump into 90 and talk through how you're creating these quarterly conversations. We're going to go through the questions. So we talked a little bit about how you're going to really focus on the person and their performance. So we can take a look at how 90 does that, and also how you can set up some custom questions. And then we'll go through how each of you guys are going to fill out the forms and ultimately run the meeting within the system.
Yeah, I mean, and so there's plenty in here to go do. So my recommendation, because my clients have found it, it's pretty simple, but take close notes. This will be a video you can watch later on, but plan to set one of these up at least as a test here very, very soon, because so you can actually, because then you want to come up with a strategy of when to do it with your client, with your employees. And the best time to do it, Christine, is really right after your quarterly process, right? So, your leadership team runs their quarterly. Each of the departments should run their departmental quarterlies. If you haven't started doing that yet, have we done that webinar yet? I don't remember now.
I don't know. I think we did one on quarterly meetings, and then maybe dove a little bit into the department.
We gotta do something. We gotta do one on departmental stuff, and like rolling it out and getting the departments, know exactly what we need to be doing too. So you want to get all that done, because you're going to want to be able to talk to people about, hey, let's talk about the last quarter, the rocks you took on, the to-dos you took, and it's like, it's really still fresh. We're still looking back, because then you also want to be able to, just like we do in the quarterly meeting, say, okay, that's the last time we're looking at the last quarter. Last quarter is the past. We can't influence that anymore. We can only influence the future. We want to turn the page on that and go into the new quarter. So psychologically, it's good to get these things, in quick succession. Leadership quarterly, department quarterlies, and then the quarterly conversations. Get all that out of the way, and then make that a cadence next time around. We're going to, hey, and also by then too, Christine, you're going into your quarterly conversations with a new set of rocks, and everyone feels new and pumped, and like, okay, this is a time to layer on new activities and behaviors and understanding, so we can have a great quarter.
Exactly. So each quarter, either the manager or maybe somebody like on an HR admin team is doing this for you guys, but you'll just come into the system and set up a new quarterly conversation. The title is really meant so that you guys can start to specify, like if I'm running quarterlies with all my client success team members, I'll just do, CS quarterly, and then maybe specify Q3, just so that there's some context there. So up to you, however you want to name it. And then you start getting into who is a part of that conversation. So you can leave yourself as the manager or choose a different one. And then when you're choosing your team members, these are all unique. So when I say that, I mean, if I select 3 people here, it's not like, oh, the 4 of us are all meeting together. It's a one-on-one with Dan. It's a one-on-one with Jessica. And so this is just a way to bulk create a couple conversations at one time. So,
which is a way to think about it. You don't want to leave anybody out. There's a reason for that. The reason for that is we want to make sure we got good coverage on all the people we need to be talking to. So you don't think about it twice. Do it right away.
And you're choosing between which account. If there's somebody's in 2 accountability chart seats, then you're choosing which seat you want to review them on, so that this is going to pull up when we go look at GWC. You can choose the conversation due date, because they're actually going to get an email letting them know, hey, you need to fill it out. It's due by this day, so that they have that all completed. And then the final aspect is really choosing the time frame. So you can, if this is Q3, I can select that. Maybe my dates for the quarter are a little bit off than normal, and we actually had our quarter ending on the 8th. So I'll make it through the 11th. So just so that this is so you can capture all of the rocks that you had within the given quarter.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 switches down there at the bottom. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. The couple other like quick toggles that you have. One is making it formal. So if you want this to be a conversation where it's not just each person fills out the forms and then you use PDFs and you don't really have a record of it, you can make it formal. And what that does is that means after each person submits their forms, you can come together and run a feedback meeting side by side. So this is a great option. If you do want to have a record of that conversation and you want to have something that you can go back to and see each person's response. And then these two are really regarding what questions do you want to see? So the team members that are being evaluated, these people I selected here, do you want them to fill out information on their core values, GWC, and their performance? And then do you want them filling out the LMA questionnaire? I typically recommend leaving these both on because it leads to that openness. You know, you're looking for them to think about themselves and think about you as a manager. I think it's really important, but
Yeah.
options to turn them off if you want to.
Yeah, I 100%, Christine. I mean, you should definitely give people the tools they need to have that reflective moment. I mean, that's how we get better. So 100%.
Yeah. And I did just see a question come through. So when you're selecting these team members to review, these are all of your paying users. And so you want to make sure that they're an active user in 90 and that they're in an accountability chart seat. So you can see this person's not in a seat. You want them to be in a seat because that's a part of their quarterly review. Something we are looking at implementing by the end of the year, it's in progress with Dev right now, is allowing you to add people at a discounted rate into the system. We're experimenting with about $2 per user per month so that you can let them just be a light user and be a part of a quarterly conversation. They can log in, fill it out, have their own rocks and to-dos, but not be connected to any teams. So that's something we are looking at moving forward too.
Yeah, because we think it's great to have all these things in there.
Yes. Yes.
It's valuable. And you want ultimately that's the whole point of having a business operating system is everyone's participating in it and has visibility to it, because that's the only way you get to the point where everybody's rowing in the right direction.
Absolutely. So once you create the conversations, each person is filling these out separately. So if there's one between me and Jim, we each get an email and we're each filling out the forms. So you would come in here and essentially you start off with the managee, the direct report, and you're looking at, hey, how do they look compared to the core values of the company? So these are pulled directly from the VTO, and you're just going through and filling out their plus, minus, and minus assessment for each of those.
And the coaching here is that, so you want to come up with a shared understanding what plus, minus, and minus mean within the organization. Plus, we tend to say means you usually display this core value. Most of the time, you live this core value. Sometimes when you're plus and minus means I don't really see it. And here's the thing: when you give someone a minus, know that that's a conversation point, and that's a great place to start with hey, listen, when I haven't seen you display this core value, is a great way to start the conversation. But I don't know that I've had a chance to see it. That's one way it can go. And here's the one it's more important to be thoughtful about. Hey, I've seen you not represent this core value. And here's 3 instances of that. You want to come back with very specific things when you're talking about that, so it doesn't just feel like it's your feeling on it. You want to turn to an opinion. I have a talk I give Christine about facts, feelings, preferences, and opinions. And facts are just cold hard facts. They're just true or not true. They're measurable and they're verifiable. You could disprove a fact, but it's usually but that's different than a feeling, which has no basis in reality whatsoever. It's just how I feel. I don't need to tie it back to anything. And you want to have those facts. Get to the place where you have an opinion. You need to know what the facts are. You need to know what your feelings are. What your preferences are. And your employees, your direct reports, should feel that you've given it proper consideration. For them to feel heard and seen, you need to make sure that you've given it, hey, I don't see you being bold, man. Well, here's an instance where you could have been bold, but you weren't. And right. Tell me about that. And you come back with 3 of those, like, listen, do you want to be bold? Because being bold is part of who we are. So let me talk to you about how I think you could be more bold. And is that something you want to go do? That's a great conversation. That is a meaningful conversation. You're going to get to a conclusion on that that's meaningful. And that's really what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and you can take all of those notes down here in the bottom. So this person's not going to see those until you actually are comparing and looking at your responses side by side. So I would say put those details in here. It's going to be helpful so that during the conversation, you're not forgetting what you were looking to bring up or anything like that. And you have those talking points ready.
Yeah, and you don't really want the, you don't want the gotcha moment. It's like, hey, just thinking about it, these are some things, just tell me about that. Because I've actually had that with my people that I was reporting to, said, hey, here's a time where I really felt like, this unfortunate thing happened. And I would be able to say, I appreciate you bringing that up, but here's where I was from my perspective. It's like, oh, now we all have a better understanding of how we were seeing each other. And that's great info. I mean, we're able to work better together.
Definitely. So the next section is still looking at the person and looking at their accountability chart seat. So here you're going to see the seat title, you got roles and responsibilities, and then you're going through GWC, gets it, wants it, and capacity to do it, and filling out yes, no for each of those.
Yeah, and I think it's once again, anytime where you say no, we'll know that we don't think you should sit in a seat unless it's all yeses, right? That's the bar on GWC. And the only one that we think can be somewhere in the middle is capacity, because we can say not yet. It's like, hey, you just took on this role, but it seems like you're really struggling with this aspect of it. Let's and be specific about that. Like, hey, I got a feeling like maybe you need some additional training or support or coaching in this part of the role. Does that sound fair? Yes, it does. Okay, let's come up with a plan for that, because we only going to go 3 quarterlies where this is true before I got to say, you know what, you're just not going to fit in this role, right? We got to get there. We got to get you there quickly. And you don't even have to give them 3 strikes, really, Christine. But 3 strikes is what we say is a stand. That's as far as you'd ever take it. And people have to be committed to wanting to solve any problems you find. This is also a great time to bring back the conversations we've had before about measurables and processes. Every one of these roles and responsibilities, it should be really clear to both of you. And in some future version of this, Christine, I hope these things show up about which measurables and processes are related to these roles and responsibilities.
Absolutely.
And because that way, because we really want to be more specific about, hey, I think you're pretty good at cold calls, except this. You're doing them well, but you're not doing them enough. Tell me about that. And so on. So, because I think you want to get down to those really specific moments so you can figure out where the coaching belongs. And the more we can bring data into it, we take the drama out of it. Data in, drama out. That's what we're trying to get to. So, and that should be your tone as you're participating in these meetings. Hey, we're here for each other's mutual benefit. We're not here to be dramatic. No one wants to get anybody. We just want to have a great next step. We both want to see a great future for each other, and sometimes that's working together, sometimes it's not, or maybe finding the right seat for you. But GWC, pretty simple measure, but I know is a heavy thing, and gosh, man, you be really specific about what you think is the no.
Exactly. And through all these sections, you can add those comments in here. So like these questions are really just a starting point. But as you're kind of wondering, hey, are you doing enough prospecting, or how are your sales meetings going? It's like, even put question prompts of like, oh, I want to ask them more about this in this comment section as you're thinking about that person too.
That's right. I mean, sometimes, we just, for all kinds of reasons, we don't end up having a solid understanding of like how they're really doing with one part of their role and responsibility. And that's not great, but this is a great time to like, let's get really clear on what you think success is there. Let's turn this expectation into agreement. If we don't have a measurable around it, there's a good chance we don't have the same understanding of what being great at prospecting means, right?
Yeah.
So, either there's measurable for it, or there's something that we should talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about it. The next section is related to performance data. So it's actually going to pull in that person's rocks, to-dos, and measurables for the time frame that you went through and selected here. So if you're not seeing the data that you thought you would, you can always open up the time frame. I have no idea if Blake has anything assigned to him for those, but essentially, just like you can see the to-do chart here, you're getting a total number from that time frame, and then you're also looking at like, hey, is everything getting completed late? Is stuff past due consistently? So you get a little bit of that performance aspect too, as it relates to rocks, to-dos, and measurables.
Yeah, and this is completely not pure EOS stuff, but this is really, I think, valuable part of what we do. So obviously everyone gets it. If you take a to-do, it's usually inside a level 10 meeting. Most of the to-dos inside our system come from that weekly meeting that we're having with somebody. And you're taking it as a commitment to that team to get that done by the due date. Now, the 90 automatically puts it 7 days out, right? We automatically give you 7 days. But you want to get better and better at predicting, right? That's one of your 5 leadership abilities. You're gonna get better and better at predicting how much you can get done in what time frame. And so the more you can say to people as they're giving you to do, hey, can you make that due on this date? Because I don't have time this next week. I don't have, so the more you can predict really when you're going to have time to get it done, the better it is for everybody. Because that way you get a green part of your chart here. The completed late, that's just might be that, hey, tell me about that. If that's a high number, or hey, tell me about why we're doing this so much. Because it might just be, hey, I've been taking on too many to-dos. There's a lot of to-dos, and like you'll know looking at the number, 83 to-dos. Is that a lot of to-dos for you? Yeah, I don't really have I don't have enough extra time to take on these to-dos that aren't part of my standard job. That's a great conversation. We might have to go to a delegate and elevate and figure out what's right, or maybe there's some automation we could add to your job. But there's a great conversations. It isn't a gotcha. It's just about understanding what's really happening in the role.
Yeah, and I would say almost every single meeting of these that I run, there's to-dos and issues that are getting created throughout this quarterly conversation. So like, as I'm talking to people, it's like, hey, I'm going to go look into that. I'm going to get you this information that you need. Or, hey, let's talk about that as the team and figure out how we can make something work. So you still have that create button where you're adding stuff to your to-dos and issues list to continue your learnings from here.
Is it just like all the other meetings? This is an opportunity to find where the issues are lurking and hiding in your organization, bring them to the fore so you can actually go solve them.
Absolutely. And then you do have a general notes area. So anything you want to put in here, again, we like have some prompts, but any final comments about that person, feel free to throw them in there.
Now, this is my favorite part, Christine.
Yes. So this is why I don't like it when people I almost don't want to have to toggle there for them to turn it off, because I think it's so important for the employee to think about how am I being led and managed, because there might be issues up here that are because I wasn't given the tools or the training I needed. And so it gives them a chance to really think about it from that perspective.
I don't be a coward. Get the feedback on how you're doing as a leader and a manager. And this is LMA. This is on your roles and responsibilities. If you have direct reports, your very first role responsibility should be LMA. And there's a reason for that, because the most important thing we're doing as leaders in an organization, regardless of which level you're at, is being leaders, building leaders, building leaders. We have to be advancing the people below us. That's how we grow as an organization. We got to be delegating and elevating, helping people achieve more. That is the absolute recipe for success if you're building great team members who are going to be able to be great leaders someday too. So, and these are all great questions, and really tend to be the source of problems. If you've hired someone who's in the past done great in roles, or you feel really great about them and then they struggle, oh my God, Christine, it is 90% of the time because they don't have a good manager. And people leave their manager. People don't leave the business, they leave their manager. So don't get caught being a crappy manager. Give people the opportunity to talk about it, because let's be clear, they work for you, so it's going to be difficult for them to be open and honest with these things. That's going to be a challenge. So give them the open opportunity to say, hey, am I really giving you enough clear direction? you know, even go there with like, go into it, say, are you clear when I give you something to do? You know, you didn't get this done. Tell me about that. Stammer, stammer, stammer. Were you really clear about what I wanted to get done? Because we talked about this today in our stand-up with my team. Knowing what done looks like is the most important thing. It's such an important part of becoming a mature member of a team, is agreement on what done looks like, and make sure you've been clear about it. It doesn't work. Necessary tools, that goes without saying, that we need to have the right tools, and different people have different thoughts about what that means. So whatever you thought the right tools were may not be their thought on it. So listen to what their thoughts are. I'm like letting go of the vine. This is the old story about the entrepreneur hanging from the vine, and you got to let go. You got to stop worrying about the things that were part of your past roles and move on to your, it's part of delegate and elevate. Christine, you ever had a problem letting go of the vine?
Every day.
Every day. Yeah, me too. It's hard.
But I work at it.
It's hard for all of us. And the thing about it is you gotta listen to the feedback, listen for those things. This is your opportunity when your great employees can give you feedback on your blind spots. We all have blind spots. It is a naturally occurring phenomenon. We think we're doing great, especially if you're a quick start. You're just going to barrel forward and you're not quite sure who you're trampling over. So this is good stuff to figure out.
Yeah.
And clearly we want to make sure that everyone's acting with the good of the company in mind. And clarity breaks. Christine, I get a lot of questions about how my employees know if I'm taking clarity breaks? Because you fricking telling them all the time. See how good it was? I didn't cuss.
Yeah, I think that comes up a lot, whether it's putting it on your calendar. So it's like, hey, they see you have time chunked, or it's like, hey, this is something I'm sharing in my personal, professional good news, like in a level 10 meeting, any of those ways, like lets people know that you're taking them and having some active thoughts.
If you don't know what clarity breaks are, it's a time where you spend away from working in the business and you're working on the business, but just taking a break away by yourself. And it's simple as writing for an hour or a half hour or whatever time you get, and because you will get the clarity. It is like stepping into the shower and having a great idea, or waking up in the middle of the night and having a great idea. But you want to intentionally put those breaks into your day, into your week, into your month, so that you can actually think about things. And if you've got people working for you, it's a great idea to schedule clarity breaks to thinking about each of your people that report to you. Take a moment and give 15 minutes to really think about what would be the best thing for them. What are they really great at? How could I do better at helping them find their best self? And share that information back with people. Hey, I had a clarity break thinking about each of you today. I can't wait to share with you in our one-on-ones, because I really appreciate the work you do. I think there's all things we can learn. I mean, these are great ways of using that, but also teaching your employees to do the same thing. You should all be taking clarity breaks. It's amazing what I come up with.
And so these leadership and the management questions, these are all set in 90. They're kind of essentially like the best practices in here. So you can't go through and change any of the wording necessarily.
At the current time.
At the current time, I would love the ability to do that, because I know there's little things that I would obviously go in and tweak myself, especially since, it might even be like per team of what I want to ask questions about. But at this time, set in stone, and for the leadership and the management area. And then same thing with the sections up here at the top as far as core values, GWC, and the performance data go. But I will show you, once we jump out of this, how you can actually add some custom questions into the conversation. So if you want to ask anything completely unrelated to any of these things, you can throw those in here too.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah,
these are the pure mechanisms that occur within EOS for how we define leadership, how we define management, and these are good divisions. This notion of leadership being about how I connect you with the vision, and management how I help you execute on the job in the day-to-day way. These are great questions to be asking yourself, but every organization has to come up with their own approach to it for sure. But I would go through each of these questions and be probing and try to get more out of your direct reports, make sure they're really clear on it, not just is rubber stamping it. Expectations are clear. Am I communicating well? And think about that when you go into the meeting. Like, it seems like sometimes like this, I'm not necessarily communicating the way you totally get it. I don't get the same recognition from you that I want to get when I know you really understand. Can we come up with a way of you telling me, like, code words for saying, hey, I'm a little baffled right now. Okay, baffled. I know what that means. When you say baffled, that means I need to go back and rephrase it. The right meeting pulse. Some people need more contact points than others. Some teams I run are, all they need is a weekly meeting. Some need daily stand-ups to really stay on track. I think that's, having an open conversation about that is great.
Yeah.
And of course, the rewarding and recognizing, critically important part of making sure core values are really resonant within the organization. And then
Absolutely.
quarterly conversations. And so I actually have one client that does uses this tool for monthly conversations, Christine, because I think that's more apropos of keeping everybody on track. And I applaud that.
That's great. Yeah, like you said at the beginning, whenever I have someone new coming on board, we do this at the 30-day mark because it's and you can even do it at 60 days. It depends how it lines up with your quarter of like when somebody's hired. But right when they come in, they know, all right, in 30 days, I'm going to go through this with my manager. And then they have an understanding for what they're going to be evaluated on and how they're going to be able to provide feedback.
Yep.
Right away. So it lends themselves to that consistency. All right. So let me jump out of this. So this is essentially the form that I fill out separately. So in this conversation, you can see I'm the manager and Blake is the direct report. And so I review him up here and then I review myself down here. Blake gets the same forms. He reviews himself and then he reviews me. So we're doing that completely separately. And then when each of you are done.
I just want to point out there's both a save and exit and a finish button down there. So
yes,
if you're not sure yet, save and exit's the place to go. Save what you've got. But finish is like, once you're finished, especially in the formal one, once you're finished, it's not editable anymore. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So once I click finish, it's actually signifying to the other person like, hey, this person's done. They won't be able to see your stuff until both people have submitted and you're ready to run that conversation together.
Right.
And you can see, so this is a conversation I was just in, I pressed finish. And so we can see the manager, me, has submitted the forms, but Blake has not started yet. So each of these gives you a little bit of a breakdown essentially on where each person is. If you go ahead and click on the conversation and the details to the right. If it is formal, that's when you see, hey, each person is done. There's going to be this feedback meeting button. And so that's what opens it up so that you can actually see responses side by side and go through these. So this is what you're either doing in person, if you're work from anywhere, maybe you're doing it on Zoom, and you can go through this together.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of direct reports I've never met, Christine, in person. I know them only in 2D. How about you?
Yeah, I'm the same way. So it obviously will be exciting to get together for quarterlies in the future, but yeah, it's been interesting, onboarding and building a culture completely remote. So all of these you can see are the same questions. It's really just going to list comments side by side, and you can add to these or change answers during the call. So if we're talking about this and I want to write down some additional things, if Spencer says, well, now that we've talked about it, I think I would rather put yes than no, you can have those conversations and make those changes real time. And then of course, just like we pointed out earlier, you're creating issues and to-dos probably throughout this meeting, just as things come up and as you're discussing them. And at the end, this is just typing it in. So you just type in each person's name. This works where one person opens the meeting and they're sharing their screen. So it's not like both of you guys can be in there quite yet. Looking to set that up next year. But this is just a verification of like, hey, yes, we did this together. We both understand. And if there's any like outside forms that people completed or like, performance things that I want to pull from systems that they're using, you can always attach those here as well.
Yeah, and I guess I want to bring up so most of these, we're just trying to get great feedback, but there are plenty of times where if you do this long enough, the outcome of this meeting will be an exit. We have to start planning the exit. And so might be a time where there's forms that are part of that you might attach to this that say, okay, this is the next steps. Here's the process we have to follow. And we don't have to exit them right away, by the way. Quite often it becomes an issue. It's like, well, we have to, not Spencer. Spencer, you're not allowed to go anywhere. But in this example, hey, Spencer's not going to work. We've agreed that Spencer's going to move on. So we need to go do these things, and that's an outcome here, and we can make that. However, you do it internally of making it an issue or making it to do for someone to initiate a process to get that going, and that's one great example of where an attachment might help at this point. Just Absolutely. To have a record over it, because this has become a recording of something that happened within the organization that might be discoverable.
Yeah, and this is all accessible to owners and admins when the conversations are done. So they won't be able to see anything that's in progress, but as soon as something is saved, so we've got the same sort of finish button here that signifies this conversation is done and can be archived. And then anybody that's an owner or admin can go into the archive and see the responses over time. So if you do have any of those situations, like Jim explained, you have access to those. But if somebody's not an owner or admin, they can only see the conversations that they're specifically a part of. It's only tied to them.
Yeah, so to be really clear, so we've tried to build in, I didn't have nothing to do with it. Well, Christine has built in the functionality that most companies need for both having the informal quarterly conversation that we implore you to start doing immediately with your folks, and the more formal one that has to be part of an HR process that, depending upon your jurisdiction, might include a lot of formality, saving of records, and the discoverability that comes along with exiting somebody for cause.
Absolutely. So just to be clear, when you don't make something formal, if you leave that toggled off, essentially you get the functionality where each person fills out the forms, but then there's no meeting, there's no seeing the information side by side. Essentially, each person would print their forms to PDF and then bring it to an in-person conversation to talk about it. So there's not going to be a record of like seeing things side by side. It's just, I can see my own responses and they can see their own.
And Christine, can you, I guess I should have known this, but can you print out the form for somebody that is not in the system yet? So if I wanted to look at someone in a seat, mm-hmm. and I'm gonna get them an assessment, but they're not in the system yet. But can I give them a PDF that they can then write on for that meeting?
You could create a conversation, it just be blank, but it's not, you won't be able to pull in anybody from the accountability chart. So you probably have to wait. Right.
They wouldn't have any of that. They wouldn't have any of that stuff in it. They wouldn't have to-dos. They wouldn't, because they're not in the system. Got it.
Yeah. Or if you ask our team though, like I know a couple people have requested just like blank forms through the chat. So if you do need that, we've got one that we typically just send out whenever people request it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. To be clear, folks, we would love to have you add everybody in your company inside of 90. We think that's a great place. And that's why we're coming up with this lower cost license, so that's easy to do. But we also just want you to have great conversations and run a great company. So if we can help you get to that and really quarterly conversations, that is my prime driver. I think Christine's as well. Start having these quarterly conversations right now. You're going to see so much uplift from it. You're going to learn so much. You'll learn to be a better manager and leader, and your folks will appreciate you and you'll have better understanding. So don't, run, don't walk, get going right now.
Yeah. And the annual reviews, they're in here, they do work exactly the same way. So as far as creating the conversation, you can see you have the same prepare form and then run the feedback meeting option. You can add custom questions here. This is something we're looking to bring to the quarterly conversation side of things, but this is just giving you the ability to, I'll open this up so you get a little view. So instead of just having core values, GWC, and then your performance stuff, you can add in these sort of custom questions. And that way you just, ask about, areas that might need improvement. I know some people put in like salary stuff at the end of the year. So it gives you the opportunity to change it up a little bit if you do want to do something a little more unique in the fourth quarter.
And Christine, these are all right now, these are all text fields as opposed to multi-selects and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you put in a question, it's really just asking somebody for a free form response back.
Okay. I know I've got a client that want, and I said, hey, can we add more formats? And there's like, hey, once there's other tools coming, man. It's coming.
Yeah, I know.
It's a great idea, just like to have, hey, here's the 3 possible responses, pick one. Yeah.
Yeah, Alex and I are a UI UX designer. We're just talking about that the other day. So we're gonna make things a little bit easier to use on the page. And that was one thing we were discussing adding into.
Excellent.
So not in the near future, but we are thinking about it. So don't worry.
All right, on the list.
I think that probably covers most of what we wanted to do on the software side of things. And I did just want to quickly talk about like how you can get started right now. So we've mentioned a couple of these quick things, but go communicate to your managers, even if it's sharing this webinar. I think giving them some context about what you want to do as a company is really important.
Yeah, and it's worthwhile. I mean, quite a few of my clients will go through and they'll do a practice run. So, hey, just you can, because you can set it up so it's 2 people on the leadership team or 2 managers doing it for each other and not really giving each other any feedback, but just going through the steps, because there's a couple of steps in there. And so, and you can just delete the whole thing when you're done, but to walk through, create the conversation, connect the 2 people, have them both answer questions, and then see what that output looks like and feels like. It's, you can do it as much as you want. There's no restriction. You can do as many annual reviews you want at any time, and go through it and just be really clear on it, because the more clarity you can bring to the conversation about why you're doing this and how you're doing it, the more people you'll get to buy in.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important, like set the date, let people know the expectations, talking to your managers and even checking in with them after that first round and seeing how things went is going to be really important, just to make sure you're helping like course correct anybody that maybe took things in a different direction. And a coach can definitely help with all of this too. So if you feel like this is a lot to get done, I've got a lot of managers, I've got a lot of people to train, I think a coach could definitely help with the execution side of things too.
Yeah, no doubt. That is one of the places where we get pushed back quite a bit on this is, hey, it's just one more thing for me to go do. And it is a thing. And if you're going to do it well, you're going to take some time to it. But this is part of executing. As you saw in there, one of the questions we asked about management, are you having quarterly conversations? It is one of the parts that's part of LMA. So a great way to think about your time management and where this fits into that is to think about how all of your roles and responsibilities have a certain amount of time allocation to them, right? You should be mindful about how much time those take in general, and budget this into your quarter. Every quarter I have to do this. And it's going to be after the quarterly, and I'm going to spend this much time on each of my direct reports. It's one of the reasons we don't want you to have 24 direct reports, because that doesn't work. Yeah. You can't really pay attention to them, and you can't be mindfully managing them and leading them. But put that in there and understand that and figure out how much time, and it's going to take some allocation time the first time you do it. But the reality is, the payback is that there's clarity and trust being built, and that it takes out so much of the friction in getting things done going forward. People end up with tools for how to communicate better out of this. They have much greater clarity about how they're going to be judged and what success looks like. Communication runs better. You're going to get, if it takes you, 4 hours of time to prep for these, and then you actually run the meetings, you're going to get 5x that easily, Christine. That would be my suggestion in the next 2 quarters, as people just operate better and you end up solving problems that were otherwise keeping people from executing well.
Absolutely. And then, great. So that's all I had. We can jump into IDS. So I know I've seen Spencer and Stephen answering some questions in the chat. Anything else will get thrown on our IDS list to make sure we talk about. And we will be sending a recording of this webinar. We'll send along the slides for you guys in the follow-up email. So if it doesn't get out tomorrow, you should be seeing that Monday.
Fantastic. All right. All right, not too bad.
Not too bad at all. Great. Easy one.
Nice.
Yeah. So you guys know it over here in the left-hand navigation, and agree. I think it's just a really important thing to point out to your teams, you know, bring it up at your next state of the company, let people know it's going to be happening, and just bring awareness to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, even with my teams, I point out that it's there. You know, we talk about when we teach all these tool sets together, but people don't even see it. They don't. But that icon is right there. Everyone sees it, right, Christine? Everyone gets to, you know, that icon's on everyone's screen. It's just they
Absolutely.
have different functionality once they're inside it.
Yeah.
But everyone can set up a meeting to review with somebody. They don't even have to have anyone reporting to them, right? They could just do a practice meeting.
Yeah, definitely. So we have that happen all the time where we set up practice meetings. You could, you know, create a temporary dummy user if you wanted to, just with like a info at your email address to set something up initially. So feel free to explore with that.
Excellent.
I love this idea and I would love to do it. But right now, yes, no, is just the standard what EOS best practice is. But yeah, I would love to add a not yet or a maybe option.
Yeah, Tina, that's
for
100%, Tina, 100%. Well,
Yeah.
and I think we've also had the suggestion that people would like to have more nuanced responses to some of these things, as opposed to yes or no. I mean, we try to make it super simple. You know, EOS is all the 101 tools, the really super simple stuff that everyone can understand. And sometimes you get to that place where you need to have a more nuanced response. So I think, you know, watch this space for further developments. But great suggestion, Tina. Thank you.
Absolutely. Did you say add note section cannot be seen by the employee until the formal face-to-face meeting? So that is something that we are looking at setting up. So right now, as soon as each person is done, the meeting opens up like this, so that now Spencer and I can either start the meeting or we can click on the details and see all of the responses. So I know some people would prefer, oh, I don't want my direct report to click on the meeting and see the responses before we've run the feedback meeting. So that is some like settings option we're looking at working in right now, because we have gotten that feedback. But as of right now, as soon as each person is finished, it's opened up so that you can go in and view those responses. That is if the conversation is formal. So if it's not, then you're really never going to see the other person's response.
And here's the thing, Christine, is that if that's where you're at right now, there's a good chance that you've got bigger problems. I mean, this is a problematic, you know, conversation. There's a good chance HR is going to be at that quarterly conversation.
Yeah.
Right. If you're really concerned about that. But I mean, but you do, it's a communication discipline to develop as a manager, to be able to make sure that you're, hey, I know the impact of my words. I own my words. I'm trying to be impeccable with my words, and know what you put in here. They're going to see it. And then you have more background when it actually comes time to actually have the conversation. Because then if you want to have that larger explanation, and especially if it's you know, this is a core value strike or something like that, you can attach that as part of the meeting when you're in there. And that would be the appropriate way to handle that.
Just a suggestion for those that don't want to share their responses beforehand. By best practice, you could teach it to your managers to only submit the form once you are about to run the meeting rather than finishing it. So save and exit until you're ready. You will be on that page anyway, and you'll be able to run the meeting. Additionally, Christine, I created an informal quarterly conversation. If at any point you want to just submit it blank and show them what that would look like.
Perfect. Spencer is the true pro because he answers these questions all the time.
All day long. He's seen more use cases than any of us. So thanks for that, Spencer. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. All right, trends. Is there any way to see past? Oh, yeah. So this is something that we are looking at working into a new tool called Dashboard. So it's not really ready for full release quite yet. We've got a rock next quarter to kind of determine what we can do to get it out to everybody. But that is something where there is a chart built in where you can actually see somebody's performance over time. And that's as it relates to not only the GWC scores, but their core value assessment, any of the leadership and management questions that are about somebody. So we are looking at incorporating some more of that historical performance information. It's all just kind of a not yet here situation, but 100% agree we need it.
Right, and I think it's especially with GWC, that's such a blunt tool for assessment. But you can go back and look at past conversations, even ones that were informal, right, Christine? So that's how we've done it in the past, where I'm just gonna go back and look at those conversations, look at those archived ones that were done, and I can know what was done within them.
Yeah.
Right. Those are all, sorry, this is our demo account. I often archive incomplete conversations, but even if they're informal, your personal responses will be saved. If they were formal, both responses would be saved.
Yeah. So you got access to all those back there.
Yeah. But it's a good call out. It's good. But hopefully you remember, that'd be something you'd know going into it. But all the same, you can go back and review that ahead of time.
Yeah. Formal versus informal. So I think we went over this. Just another quick explanation.
Let's make it bullet points for them. So
great idea. So informal, we've got each person still fills out the forms, but you only see your own responses.
There's no side-by-side view.
Yeah. And no meeting. So essentially each of you fills out the forms, and then the only option is the PDF. So it's great for, I think, like an in-person kind of conversation, and if you don't want a record of it. But I know we added the formal toggle there because it's like we run remotely, so like we really need that meeting function. It doesn't make sense for us to not have a record of it, even if it's a good conversation every quarter. I know for us internally, we still want to see that. So that's kind of why we added this formal functionality that's outside of maybe the typical quarterly conversation scope, where once each person is done, you can see the responses side by side in the meeting.
Right, and I think that's, you could decide as internally that you're going to run in formal mode, and then just a word, it doesn't actually mean anything. It's formal in any other different sense. It's like, hey, it's still meant to be an informal conversation, but we're running it in formal mode, so we have this tool set at our disposal to run the meeting inside here and to see each other's responses. So
additionally, the informal conversation will not have the same performance review area. It will only include the rocks for that timeframe you set. If I'm not mistaken, we did plan to change that, similar to the custom questions, but for the time being, if you run an informal conversation, it'll only pull in the rocks due during the time frame you set.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right.
Cool. Thank you.
Good call outs. Past combos. Once I've saved and exited my part of the form, can I still print PDF after? Yes. So what I was just seeing is you should be able to print to PDF anytime that you've got a conversation in here. So as long as you've started it, then you can go ahead and print it. Let's see. And the PDF button should always be in the top right. The times you won't see the PDF button are when you have not started the conversation. So that's when it's going to be missing from up there. Other than that, it should be in your archive as well. So any conversations that you're a part of, you should be able to print out. All right, how do we prep the team?
I think there is an educational module. My big dog is just moving all of Laramie, Wyoming around. There is an education module that's part of the EOS process for leadership and management, for LMA. There's also a great book, How to Be a Great Boss, that talks about the very specific approach that EOS takes to leadership and management as disciplines. But it's right in there right now. So it's great to have internally standards for how you want to talk about, everyone that works as a manager inside your organization, how they are supposed to approach leadership and management. And that's really ultimately the goal. I mean, there's a starting mark that Gino wrote for us, and that there was Renee Bohr that actually created the How to Be a Great Boss book. And there's a great disciplines to learn and start from, but you've got to come up with decisions for yourself internally about what you think leadership and management are ultimately, and each of those questions, how you answer them is probably the most valid.
Yeah, I think whenever you're having that conversation with the company, like whether it's a video you make for Slack, or like you're having your team meeting, your state of the company, whenever you're announcing that you're going to start running these quarterly conversations, show them an example form and like talk through the leadership and management questions.
Yep.
Just to give them some context. And then obviously over time, everyone will get more familiar with it. It's another reason why I like doing the 30-day check-in with new hires, because it's like, hey, now you know what's coming, so nobody's kind of left in the dark. But yeah, like you said, Jim, it's all about just figuring out how you want to communicate that to everybody.
Right. And I would communicate that the first time you're going to go through this, that it isn't about setting salaries. It isn't about getting rid of people. It's about having great conversations, developing better understanding. So often we've talked about the review process as just being about, new pay rates. And that's entirely what this is not about. This is really about how do we all become more effective in making things happen for this organization. And that's probably the best context and the biggest point you've got to make with everybody. This isn't that. This isn't about your annual review where we're talking about your paycheck. It's really about how we keep getting better and better. And you think about it, the leadership quarterly is about that at the leadership team level. Then the department quarter is about making the departments run better. This is about making individuals run better. And that's really the context is set at the highest level for others.
Definitely. Yeah, it's all about high trust relationships, circling back to the beginning. And even if you want to show that to your team and have that as kind of the explanation point, I feel like it's important to give people that context, so you're not like immediately putting them on their heels or making them feel defensive when they're walking into something like this. It's about making them better.
It won't be good if that's how they're feeling. I mean, you aren't going to have a great conversation if everyone feels like they're at risk.
Yeah.
So
I think that's all that we've got. So if there's nothing else, really appreciate everybody joining. I'll go ahead and throw up my last slide here so that you can see it. Follow us on social, obviously, for more tips and things like that. If you are not already, if you haven't signed up, you can do that. And then obviously stay tuned for some of the feature requests and things that we mentioned, like the light user and being able to add people at that discounted rate so they can use the quarterly conversations should be here by the end of the year. It's in progress right now. So
yeah. And we do these office hours every month. So same thing where there's this coaching, and there's also going through the tool set and try to put them together. So if you have suggestions or questions for what we should be covering in future sessions, we'd love to hear about it. But I think maybe a manager rollout might be a good one for next quarter. For next month. But yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on whether, and they're all available on YouTube. All the ones we've done are available to back and look at. And I think they have chapter marks on them where we had various sections. So you don't even have to watch the whole full length movie version of it to get some of the content.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining, guys. We'll see you next time.
Spencer, thanks for your help. Christine, always great to see you.
Yep.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye now.